We've all been there. You hit play on a recording, eager to hear your dulcet tones, but instead a strange, unfamiliar voice assaults your ears. It's high-pitched, nasally, or just plain weird. Why does our own voice sound so different to us when we hear it played back? And why is it almost always an unpleasant surprise? The answer lies in a fascinating interplay of physics, biology, and psychology. To understand this phenomenon, let's take a quick trip into the world of sound. Sound is created by vibrations that travel through the air as waves. These waves enter our ears and hit the eardrum, causing it to vibrate. The eardrum's vibrations are then transmitted to the inner ear, where they're converted into electrical signals that our brain interprets as sound. It's a remarkable process, this transformation of simple vibrations into the richness of the soundscape we perceive. But it's also where the first clue to our voice-hating mystery lies. When we speak, the sound of our voice reaches our ears in two different ways. The first is through the air, just like any other sound. The second is through the bones in our skull. As we speak, our vocal cords vibrate. These vibrations travel through our bones, including the bones in our skull, to our inner ear. This bone conduction adds lower frequencies to our voice that others don't hear. It's like listening to your voice with a built-in subwoofer. This internal resonance creates a fuller, richer sound that we're accustomed to hearing. Recordings, on the other hand, only capture the sound waves traveling through the air. They don't pick up the internal resonance created by our bones. So when we listen to a recording, we're hearing our voice stripped of those lower frequencies, making it sound higher and thinner than we're used to. This discrepancy between our internal and external voices is often jarring. It's like seeing a photo of yourself and noticing a flaw you never saw in the mirror. Section 5. Psychology of Self-Perception. Our brains are hardwired to judge. From the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep, our brains are constantly making judgments. These judgments are not just about the world around us, but also about ourselves. This process is deeply ingrained in our psychology and affects how we perceive our own voice. But there's more to it than just the physics of sound. The way we hear our own voice is a complex interplay of physical vibrations and psychological interpretations. When we speak, the sound waves travel through the air and reach our ears, but they also travel through our bones and tissues, giving us a unique internal perspective. Our perception of our own voice is also heavily influenced by psychological factors. This internal perspective is often at odds with the external reality. When we hear a recording of our voice, it can sound foreign and unfamiliar because it lacks the internal resonance we are accustomed to. Our self-image plays a significant role. Just as we have a mental picture of how we look, we also have a mental picture of how we sound. This self-image is shaped by our experiences, memories, and the feedback we receive from others. We have a specific way we imagine ourselves sounding, and this imagined voice is often more flattering than the reality. We might think we sound more confident, more articulate, or more pleasant than we actually do. And when that image doesn't match the reality of our recorded voice, it can be disconcerting. This mismatch can lead to feelings of discomfort, embarrassment, or even self-doubt. This is compounded by the fact that our voice is one of our primary means of self-expression. It's how we share our thoughts, emotions, and personality with the world. Our voice is a reflection of who we are, and any perceived flaws in it can feel like flaws in ourselves. It conveys our emotions, thoughts, and personality to the world. When we speak, we are not just communicating information, we're also conveying our identity. Our voice can express joy, sadness, anger, and a myriad of other emotions. So when we hear a recording of our voice that we perceive as negative, it can feel like a critique of our very being. This negative perception can be amplified by our tendency to be our own harshest critics. It can feel like a critique of our very being. This is why many people find it difficult to listen to recordings of their own voice. It's not just about the sound, it's about what that sound represents. Understanding this can help us be more compassionate towards ourselves and others. Section 6. The mere exposure effect. Familiarity breeds acceptance, or not. Interestingly, research has shown that the more familiar we are with something, the more we tend to like it. This phenomenon is called the mere exposure effect, and it plays a significant role in our daily lives. From the songs we listen to repeatedly on the radio to the faces we see every day at work or school, familiarity often breeds a sense of comfort and preference. This is known as the mere exposure effect. It suggests that our repeated exposure to certain stimuli increases our liking for them. This effect is not limited to just objects or people. It extends to various aspects of our lives, including our preferences for food, places, and even ideas. This applies to everything from faces to songs to, yes, even our own voices. When we hear a song multiple times, it often grows on us, and we start to enjoy it more. Similarly, seeing the same faces regularly can make us feel more comfortable and connected to those individuals. We're constantly bombarded by the sound of our own voice, so you'd think we'd be quite fond of it. After all, we hear ourselves speak every day, whether we're talking to others or simply thinking out loud. This constant exposure should, in theory, make us more accepting of our own voice. However, this constant exposure doesn't seem to translate into acceptance when it comes to our recorded voice. Many people find it jarring to hear their voice played back to them, often describing it as strange or unpleasant. This reaction is quite common and can be attributed to the differences between how we perceive our voice internally and how it sounds externally. Perhaps because the recorded version is so different from what we're used to hearing, it remains forever in the unfamiliar category. When we speak, we hear our voice through the vibrations in our skull, which gives it a deeper and richer tone. However, when we listen to a recording, we hear it as others do, without those internal vibrations, making it sound higher-pitched and less resonant. This discrepancy can make our recorded voice seem foreign and uncomfortable, despite our frequent exposure to it. Section 7. Comparing apples and oranges. Why other voices don't bother us. Another intriguing aspect of this phenomenon is that we rarely have the same aversion to other people's voices. When we hear someone else speak, whether it's in person or through a recording, we tend to be more forgiving and less critical. This is a fascinating contrast to how we perceive our own voices. We may find some voices more pleasant than others, but we don't typically experience the same level of disgust or discomfort when we hear recordings of other people. This difference in perception can be attributed to several psychological factors. For instance, when we listen to others, we are often more focused on the content of their speech rather than the sound of their voice. This is likely because we don't have the same internal bias towards other people's voices. Our brains are wired to be more critical of our own voices because we have an ingrained idea of how we should sound. This self-perception is often at odds with the reality of how our voice is actually heard by others. We don't have a preconceived notion of how they should sound, so we're more accepting of their recorded voices even if they differ slightly from what we're used to. Additionally, the emotional connection we have with our own voice can amplify our reaction to hearing it played back. In contrast, we approach other people's voices with a more neutral stance, allowing us to appreciate the nuances and variations without the same level of scrutiny. This acceptance of others' voices highlights the complex interplay between self-perception and auditory processing, shedding light on why we are our own harshest critics when it comes to the sound of our voice. Section 8. Embracing the uniqueness. Your voice is your signature. So the next time you hear your recorded voice and cringe, remember this: you're not alone. It's a perfectly normal reaction rooted in the complex interplay of sound, biology, and psychology. Instead of feeling embarrassed or ashamed, try to embrace the unique qualities of your voice. After all, your voice is part of what makes you, you. It's your sonic signature, and like any good signature, it's one of a kind. Section 9. Tips and tricks. How to feel more comfortable with your voice. If you're still struggling to come to terms with your recorded voice, there are a few things you can try. Listening to yourself in different settings and with different recording devices can help you get used to the variations in your voice. Practicing speaking clearly and confidently can also boost your vocal self-esteem. Remember, confidence is key. The more comfortable you are with your voice, the more others will be too. Section 10. The bigger picture. It's not just you. Think about all the amazing things our voices allow us to do. We use them to communicate, to express our creativity, to connect with others on a deeper level. The next time you feel self-conscious about your voice, remember all the good it does in the world. Focus on the message, not the messenger. Section 11, Final Thoughts, Finding Harmony in the Discord. Our aversion to our own recorded voice is a quirk of human perception. It's a reminder that the way we experience the world is subjective and influenced by a multitude of factors. So instead of letting this quirk get you down, try to appreciate the wonder and complexity of the human sensory system. After all, it's the same system that allows us to appreciate the beauty of music, the power of language, and the comforting sound of a loved one's voice.